Again, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Glenn Farrant. I'm CEO and co-founder of CriticalArc. We deliver the Safe Zone solution worldwide to help organizations such as all of us here to manage safety, security, and well-being across very complex environments with many different factors involved. Key amongst the mission to deliver safety, security, and well-being in organizations like this is whole of organization support. And today we have an esteemed panel to talk through the concept of fostering a culture of safety and well-being and it being a strategic approach to recruitment and retention. Uh, Typically, we have a range of stakeholders engaged when it comes to safety and security. Literally, the public safety team and the student affairs teams that are focused on well-being and other stakeholders. Today, we have Mario Castillo, who is Chancellor and CEO of Lone Star College, Denise Nisi Cornish, is Senior VP and COO of Western University of Health Sciences. Hey, Nisi. Alison Levy, and I'll have everyone introduce themselves and their organisation shortly, but Alison Levy from the UK, who's held very senior positions in student affairs across a range of organisations and can provide a breadth of experience. And Megan Hart-Wyant from University of North Carolina, Asheville, Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs. What we'll do now is run through introductions for everyone in your own words. And please, could you give a sense of your organisation, both how it's structured, its size, and maybe just a quick note about how you engage personally with the safety and well-being aspects of the organisation. Mario, I'll throw to you first. Would you like to go ahead?
Sure. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Thank you for having me. So I serve this institution, the Lone Star College System, which is one of the largest community college systems in the country and arguably the world. But before that, actually, let me tell you about the actual physical parameters of the institution. So we have about 8 million square feet of property, 27 locations that span 2,700 square miles. We have about 8,000 employees, about 100,000 students. If it were a city, it'd be one of the top 250 cities in the United States to give you sort of a size of the scale of the institution. I was relatively recently elevated to chancellor about a year and a half ago. Before that, I was the COO. I've been vice chancellor. I've been a college president. I was the general counsel when I first came to the institution. And in 2017, literally during Hurricane Harvey, is when I became COO on August 25th. As Hurricane Harvey was making landfall in 2017, I became CEO, and in that capacity, I was the chief emergency officer as well. So I've been personally the executive in charge of safety and security at this institution a little short of 10 years now.
Thanks, Mario. Appreciate that. What a start, hey? Straight into it. Uh, Nisi, over to you. Western University of Health Sciences. You've got a particular focus over there in terms of well-being, and especially with the overall organisation, but your role as well.
Yes, I do. Greetings, everyone. So my name is Denise Cornish. Everyone calls me Nisi. I am the Senior Vice President of our Institutional Shared Services Division and the Chief Operating Officer for Western University of Health Sciences. So we are really a premier health sciences institution with 8 different colleges. We operate in 2 different locations at the moment, one in the city of Lebanon, Oregon, and then also in the city of Pomona, California. So we have about between 3,600, 3,700 graduate students and about 1,200 employees. I may be off, give or take. But my role as the COO is the campus safety and security unit reports up to me. And so I have been in this role permanently for I would say maybe about a year. I think I might be off a little bit, but we have really taken well-being and safety of our students and our employees very seriously, and we've made a number of rapid improvements to this area with the help of CriticalArc. But in addition to the campus safety environment reporting up to me, I also oversee our crisis management function. And I'll probably get into that a little bit later as we discuss some of the other areas. But yeah, that's Western U and that's me. And thank you, Glenn. I'm happy to be here.
Thanks, Nisi. Alison, you've had a very varied level of experience and range of experience. Maybe you give the audience a bit of a sense of that.
Okay, thank you. So, yeah, I've been a senior manager at universities in the UK for more years than I care to think about, really, over 20 years. And most latterly in the Midlands of the UK. So working institutions with sort of 18,000 students, a couple of thousand staff. My responsibilities were very much about the student experience. So looking after well-being, disability support, counselling support, mental health, that sort of thing, and actually their general well-being when they're not in the classroom.
Hmm.
And worked very much in partnership with the security teams and the health and safety teams because it's one of those real levels of sort of foundations of feeling safe on campus. It's really important, particularly when you're in a city centre environment. A lot of students won't be used to being in a big city. So having things that made them feel safe and secure was always really important to us. And very much, yes, worked in a partnership approach to do our best for our students.
Thanks, Alison. I appreciate your time here. And Megan, if you'd share your responsibilities and a bit about UNCA as well, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I serve as the Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs here at UNC Asheville. UNC Asheville is nestled here at Public Liberal Arts Institution in the city of Asheville, which is located in the Blue Ridge Mountains in western North Carolina. We have about 3,000 students, largely undergraduate, focused on liberal arts education, many of them traditional age, but many of them also not traditional age students, and doing a mix of things in various disciplines, including arts, humanities, natural sciences, social sciences, a kind of across the spectrum. 350 acres here in the city, but also, Asheville is a vibrant city, but it's also completely surrounded by the Blue Ridge Mountains, and so that has provides us a really kind of unique situation that is different than kind of other city campuses. My oversight of student affairs is really a traditional student affairs portfolio, but also includes all things strategic enrollment management and recruitment and retention, admissions, and financial aid. My career has centered around student affairs, but in serving on campuses at Rhodes College in Memphis, Tennessee, and also much of my career serving in Florida, where I was doing emergency response around hurricanes. That served me well this fall as Asheville went through Helene. Today's the 6-month anniversary of Hurricane Helene, and so many of us are thinking of that today here in Asheville. And so when I joined Asheville in 2022, we were the campus was just, as many of us were coming out of COVID, but we were thinking a lot about emergency response. University police reports up through student affairs. Emergency management has been an integral portion and an integral part of that, and has reported through my structure. And so a lot of the emergency management and emergency planning has been an integral part of the student affairs and my portfolio. Much like a number of the things shared on this call already, that has largely been because of the integrated thinking about how emergency management directly impacts students. And so thinking about how we keep those so closely coordinated and integrated so that we're considering how they impact students on a daily basis. And so much of our focus has been on that over the last almost 3 years that I've been here, but in particular over the last year as we've been thinking about emergency management planning on our campus.
Thanks, Megan. And I'd just like to reflect on the breadth of perspectives here and just also identify one thing. So we've got organizations like Mario's that have tens of thousands, around 100,000 people and spread over many, many different locations in an area where there are, many challenges like the hurricane scenario and when you first arrived, Mario. So that's a particular challenge. And then there's factors around community colleges and how you operate. NICE, you have a niche organization, very focused on health and wellness as the core mission, in different locations, and has different challenges there. Megan, you mentioned it really well around Asheville being a vibrant place, really a draw for people to come to Asheville. Fantastic location, but has its own challenges, especially from the natural disaster perspective. And Alison, being able to understand the types of challenges that might be a bit different in a large inner city public university in the UK, and so we have a whole range of perspectives here and different types of experiences from the organizations that you represent. I think one thing that is we see as a pattern in the organizations around the world who are doing very well is it is in that relationship between the different parts of the organization and how, in a joined up fashion, you're dealing with safety and well-being. The best organizations have those relationships, and like in your case, Megan, public safety reporting directly up into student affairs is such a strong structure for the ultimate experience of students and the resilience of the organization. So, with that said, we'll run into a few questions now for the panel here, and I'll farm the questions out. Please sit forward and engage if there's something here that you really would like to contribute to. So the first one is about building trust through the initiatives around safety and well-being. So how can institutions create a culture of trust and transparency when it comes to campus safety and well-being? And do you have any examples, any successful examples of initiatives that have strengthened that trust and that understanding of the organization having the best interests of students and staff in mind? So would anyone like to go first there?
I guess I can start.
Thank you, Nisi.
So basically, we do understand that trust is earned, and it's earned through action and transparency. And our students and our entire university community, you should not have to worry about safety when you're on campus or at any of our affiliated sites. So that sense of security must be earned through our action, not just our assurances. So it's not enough for us to say, we'll keep you safe, right? We have to show it. And that starts with a visible and engaged safety presence. Like we have, to have officers who are trained to act both proactively and responsibly, but with empathy and professionalism. It starts with physical space that reinforce safety. It starts with easy access to help, such as utilizing our Safe Zone app to give folks that one-click access to support whenever and wherever they need it. And then also well-being first responders, like our student affairs professionals, our deans, everyone who prioritize and are equipped to connect individuals with the tools that they quickly need. But at Western U specifically, our partnership with CriticalArc, launching Safe Zone across campus has been pretty much a game changer for us. In addition to that, creating individualized safety plans for anyone, students and employees who are in sensitive, high-risk situations has been very helpful. And then we conduct welfare checks as part of our standard support protocol. So really, when people feel seen, they feel supported and protected, and that's when the trust begins. And it's not necessarily about controlling fear. It's about creating the conditions where fear doesn't have to exist.
Maybe Mario, over to you.
Sure. So for me, I think we have to conceptualize this. So I've been chancellor for, like I said, a year and a half. And so literally almost a year after I become chancellor, my first fall semester, because I became chancellor in August. So coming into my first fall semester, which would have been this last fall semester, Hurricane Beryl came across Houston. And I think a lot of people were like, okay, got a new chancellor, let's see how we do this. And it was also at the time, if you're paying any attention on LinkedIn or inside higher education, there's this big talk of sort of this enrollment cliff and how people are worried about
Right.
enrollments, and our enrollments were actually going into Hurricane Beryl, they were negative.
Mm.
And so traditionally in that mindset, you start sort of pushing all buttons to ramp up retention. And I did something that was completely inconceivable. I shut down the entire system. For some colleges were closed for 2 weeks during peak reg, right? Peak registration. And so a lot of my colleagues in the area were telling me, you're out of your mind. You're a brand new chancellor, you're negative enrollments, and you're closing the college. And then we opened up one location at a time in a very intentional way. So the way that sort of the app worked with, I would send out an email literally the first day of Hurricane Beryl. The first day after, and actually the first day during, all the way up for about 2 weeks, I would send an email with updates on the 27 locations, and then we would send out the safe zone notification after my email.
Mhm.
So we have so many locations that we had to sort of use the text wisely. Such and such location will be open tomorrow.
Right.
And so what I did is I would send out sort of the contextualized email saying, this is why these buildings are not open.
Mhm.
And I almost had groupings. So, right. So we had some buildings, for example, that had no electricity. And then it's July in Houston. Then the electricity comes back, and then we figure out that the AC isn't working.
Right.
And so there's actually all these stages, right, to get a building open that people take for granted. And we use the app to sort of, the app and the communication plan to let people know this is what's going on in all 27 locations.
Mhm.
And if your location was closed, you got to basically stay home and focus on yourself and your family. And something that happened that was really remarkable, that's really sort of touching, when we opened up 2 weeks later, some of the colleges that had been open for 2 weeks, they sent staff to the colleges that were just now opening to sort of help um, supplement the staff over there. And we had all-time record enrollments in
Mm.
the fall, all time in the history of my institution, which is 53 years old. It was all time. And so people ask me all the time what it was. When you walked into those buildings, especially the student services buildings, after we had closed for 2 weeks and we paid everyone and said, focus on your families, focus on you. The college will be here. Same thing to students. When you walk the buildings, there was a sense of palpable gratitude,
Mm.
and that gratitude manifested into people trying just a little bit harder, students feeling like they were heard. Because we had summer session going as well, right? So we basically pushed
Right.
summer session. So when students were looking for who cares about me, this institution cares about me. When employees are deciding when there's a situation where I got to choose between my family and my home and public disaster, is this institution going to be someone that's on my team as much as I'm asked to be on theirs? And I think that as an institution, I was really proud of sort of the react. And we had, by the way, we had back to back. So in the spring, it followed it. And so really sort of Hurricane Beryl in many ways solidified a lot of trust that I think up until that point, as a new chancellor, you're saying, these are how things are going to be. But I think Beryl really sort of solidified, okay, when it comes push to shove, the institution is going to put me first, is going to put my college, is going to put my home first, my family's first. And I think that goes a long way.
Yeah, that was a gutsy move, and I can see you could have extrapolated and intuited that retention would have been affected positively by that action, and the people that were in your organization understanding that. But the fact that that feeling of, I'm being looked after, therefore a lot of positivity coming back and affecting enrollment. That was probably the most surprising thing there, I guess, Mario. Yeah, brilliant. And so this question was about initiatives, and sometimes like this, initiatives are things that you don't have control over. And Megan, your experience at Asheville with Helene was extreme for the community as well. I guess how related to the actions around Helene, how was, I guess, the before and after and perception of, trust that the organization is going to look after me. How was that affected by the organization's response with Helene?
Yeah, so I certainly Mario, when you were sharing your story, there were some similarities, right, to what we experienced here in Asheville, and kind of trying to determine, right, where do you make the decisions you make, and how do you make them, and particularly for administrators, as you're deciding what buildings can be shut down and what can be open, and how you're making those decisions. And often, I think, the information that you have can be hard and starts and fits to communicate that really clearly to thousands of people at a time, right? And if you don't get out in front of those communications um, ahead of it, people think you're not communicating, understandably, right? Or they think there's other reasons you're not communicating, or because of all of these other reasons, right? They have concerns about that, and that was really hampered for us during Helene by the fact that we could not communicate, right? And so that was really really difficult. I'll actually provide an example from last night. So my team last night was standing at the edge of campus. I live in a house that is just off campus, that faces west. And I was eating dinner with my family, and I looked out my window and I said, that's a wildfire that I could not see 2 hours ago. And so I kind of started texting back and forth with my emergency operations team. And we were like, no, the fires are south of us, right? They're between here and Greenville. They're not to the west. And we said, nope, that's a wildfire that has now developed kind of two ridges over from campus. And so we had a conversation, right? And this goes to kind of some of the things that Mario was talking about. Not This is not necessarily an operational risk to campus. This is a communication risk. If we don't share, if we don't get out ahead of our campus community and share with them, like, we know what's going on. We know you and your home might be at risk. We want you to be focused on what you need to be focused on. Our students that are in these areas, whatever support you need, we're going to help take care of you. We're monitoring this. We need to get out ahead of that. And so we moved right into action, right? And got out what we call a bulldog alert. That's our CriticalArc, and started getting those messages out to say, we're monitoring it, right? We know it's 8 miles from campus. There's no immediate danger, but we knew, right, that we had students in residence halls who were likely taking pictures because they could see it out their residence hall room window, and likely sending it to mom and dad going, should I pack my go bag? What does this look like? Those sorts of things. And so making sure that when we say to students, we have bulldog alerts and we're going to be monitoring, and we're going to be taking care of you and sending you information, that when we say we're going to do those things, we actually are going to do those things. And so I think for me, one of the things that has been really important over the course of my a career overseeing emergency management is that if you say you're going to do something, getting out ahead of it and ensuring that you actually do it, even if there are moments when you're saying, I actually have no other updates in this moment. And that's okay, but there can't be a kind of silence. And so we had a number of moments. I could probably do a whole webinar about Helene, and it sounds like there's probably a number of others on this call, Beryl and Harvey, and a number of other things that could be entire webinars.
Appreciate it, Megan. Yeah, that extremely strong and reinforcing Mario's message there about communication, and yeah, thinking empathetically about the receiver of that information. Alison, in your career, could you maybe share some initiatives that some of the organisations you've been involved with have undertaken that have had positive impacts of trust and feeling of well-being as a result of being at the university for a student or staff member?
Yes, certainly. I mean, during the pandemic, when we were in the lockdown situations, that was when very much Safe Zone came into its own. It was a really important link that our students had with us immediately. You know, campus was closed, but we still had some students in residences. They still needed somebody to be there. We set up a system where we had emergency food bags. We could get a bag of emergency food to them, you know, almost within minutes. We had rooms stacked with these plastic bags ready to go. And it was really important that they knew that somebody was there and that we would actually respond to them. And that worked very well. I mean, and again, it was hand in hand with other initiatives. So that, you know, if a student alerted to us that they were just feeling isolated, then we could set up a group chat for them so that we were talking to them and make everything happen. And then I suppose almost at the other end of the scale, in a way, on the more individual scale, to me, a lot of the initiatives that work are proof of concept. Being at university, you know, you're a slice of society. What happens in society happens in universities, the good and the not so good. And we will have students who are frightened for their personal safety. You know, for whatever reason, it can be an ex-relationship, it can be whatever. And actually to be able to say to that person, we're here 24/7. You press the big red friendly button, as I call it, you know, you hit that and somebody is there. And even if all you want to do is talk to them, that's fine. But actually, if you need someone to get to you, or if you need police calling or whatever, we will do that. And whilst, you know, it's a one-to-one thing, that student might never tell anyone that they've made use of it, but actually they may well. And I think the word of mouth that we have this and it works is incredibly important and really builds trust.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Alison. It's really back to the central point here about that Megan made about, hey, we provide this service, but we can actually back that up and demonstrate that we do actually act in that way. I think that's extremely important. Just want to change the questions and the focus here a little bit to recruitment and retention, and messaging about safety and well-being, and how that fits into your approach to recruitment and retention. Each of our organizations have certain factors which we may need to get in front of with regards to individuals' thought process around whether they come to your organization or not. And it can be a bit of a double-edged sword when you start talking about safety. We've seen in the past organizations, especially at the senior level, being concerned, well, if we really emphasize that we've got these safety programs, maybe that produces the thought that, oh, why do they have to have these safety programs in place? Is this an unsafe place to be? So it's a bit of a balance. Megan, from the student affairs perspective and being responsible overall for that recruitment and retention piece, how do you strike that balance, and how do you integrate the safety and well-being messages firstly into recruitment, and how do you think it affects retention?
I think this is such a good question because, you know, we know students are coming to campuses wanting to talk about safety. When we, I think it's possible, right, that 20 or 30 years ago, students and families weren't coming to campuses with these same questions. That's just not the case anymore, right? And so whenever I have conversations with senior administrators who are like, do we want to talk about this? I'm like, yes, of course we do, right? They want to know about this just as much as they want to know about the food. They have been talking about safety. I have 3 little boys at home, a 7-year-old, and a 11-year-old and a 12-year-old. I almost forgot their ages there for a minute. Don't judge me as a mother. But they're little, right? They're tiny. They've been doing drills and having these conversations since they, you know, he's in 1st grade. So these are normalized conversations for them in their everyday lives. And so when they come to campus as 1st-year students, it's a normal conversation for them to ask. So I actually think when we don't have a good answer to it, we're the ones who feel uncomfortable and
Yes.
they sense that uncomfortability. They're like, why do you feel weird not being able to answer this question? This is just as common as me asking where the bike racks are, right? And you should have a good answer to how quickly can you get me a message? How quickly can you get this room locked down? And so one of the reasons I love having emergency management and university police in student affairs with my housing folks and with my admissions team is that we can have really fluid conversations, so that the team that does tours on campus knows that this is the answer to that question, and we should feel that comfortable being able to answer it, right? And that they know that this is something that we should be thinking about. It's something we should be planning for. And one of the things that I often talk about with my team is that not only do I want our students to know that these are the resources that they should be using and thinking about their own safety planning on campus, that they should be thinking about, yeah, we have a safe campus, we live in a safe community, but also it's a really bad idea to just leave your laptop in the library and go get a smoothie at the smoothie bar. That's a really unsafe, like, life strategy. And so I want you to feel safe here, but I don't want you to feel so safe that you make bad life decisions. So helping them feel safe, but not feel so safe that they're making bad decisions. And so helping them do that, and then helping them know that, yes, this is a safe campus, but also when you go to downtown Asheville, when you go study abroad, when you go travel the world, we're setting you up here on campus so that you're making good decisions and you're being situationally aware all the way around, right? I want you to know that you have your phone in your pocket and you have that, Allison, like you said, that red button that you can hit right here on campus. But also when you're not on campus and you don't have that red button, you should know what your resources are and who to call and what that looks like. And that's an important part of being an adult, and being prepared in the world around you. And so I like to make sure that we're strategizing around that from a recruitment and a retention perspective and having a good answer. But I also like to frame it around how we're preparing them for life on campus and life after college.
That holistic approach to the whole person. That's fantastic. Nisi, you've really elevated, I guess, security and safety there at Western over the course of the last couple of years. What have you seen as far as changes when you think about when the organization has thought about recruitment and retention?
I think Megan made a really good point. Prospective students, faculty, and parents of students, they are increasingly evaluating institutions not only for their academic rigor, but also for their safety. I mean, it's become a normal part of how they evaluate what institutions they want to attend. And so we have to understand that it's not just support services, that this has to be part of our competitive edge. And that's what has been really the goal of kind of, as you mentioned, elevating our public safety and our campus security officers. They have to have that in mind and know that they're part of the larger picture of recruiting and retaining our students, because we have to keep them safe. You know, when parents tour our campus, they want to know, how are you going to take care of my baby? And no matter how old their children are, they will always be their babies. I'm 50 and my mother will say, she's my baby. So we understand that, and we get that. We have to make wellness programs, part of a visible part of the student journey. It has to be that, training our student affairs professionals to respond to student needs and partnering with our mental health professionals to support the university community. That is key. It's key to ensuring that our community feels safe, that they know, as Chancellor Mario mentioned, that they know that they're going to be taken care of by this institutions. And then even for employees, wellness is also linked to retention. So, during personnel safety related matters, we've created, as I mentioned, those individual safety and support plans so that, staff feel just as secure as our students feel. So that's really been part of our broader goal. I mean, there's still a lot of improvements that we're working on to make. But yeah, we can't just treat safety as kind of it's just support. It has to be embedded into the culture.
Yeah, a lot of the time, what we've seen across the globe is security investments in security and safety being a bit of a grudge purchase, right? It's not necessarily aligned with the core mission of the organization. But I love how you couched it, Megan. It really is about having, especially freshmen coming out of high school, having that experience, building life experience, and then becoming adults through this process. And this is definitely part of it. Having an appropriate balance of a perception of safety, and then what to do as well. Mara, I'd like to throw to you. Community colleges are a vital part of the community and society, providing that support for everyone to get a higher education. In a lot of cases, universities and high-end universities, they're competitive to get into. There's always people aiming to get there. If one student can't make it, there's another one, another 10 lined up behind. With community colleges, the service that is provided to the individual and its impact on society is really extreme in being able to especially allow people maybe from underprivileged backgrounds to get the education and pull themselves up. Part of that is ensuring retention. And I've seen community colleges in some respects go above and beyond with regards to retention. So in terms of access to education and especially the retention side, how do you see the well-being and safety aspects playing into the mission of community colleges?
Yeah, so let me preface this, because sometimes when people in my position say things, people like me with my background, we sit there and we're like, do you even know what you're talking about? But let me preface it with this. I'm a first generation American, a first generation high school graduate, first generation college and law school, right? So a lot of our student stories is actually my story. Right. And so it's a lived experience for me, so I can speak to it in a very sort of real way where a lot of people really can't. And so that's part of the reason that I work at a community college, because it is egalitarian, because we take everybody,
Right.
right? In an increasingly elitist society where we champion people who have acceptance rates of less than 4%, I'm very proud to work and live at an institution where we take everybody, right? And it doesn't matter sort of if your parents went to college, if you're poor, if you have papers or not, if you're a first generation, it doesn't matter. And so when the organization sort of has a leader like that, it lives and breathes that mission, which is it doesn't matter if you're hungry, we will feed you. If you're homeless, we will find you somewhere to live. Because we are about sort of getting you from where you from where you are to where you want to be. Right. Now, on your side, you have to sort of want it.
Mhm.
Right. And that's really sort of the first friction point, is a lot of times, yeah, you can be a 50-year-old baby to your parent, but we're not going to treat you like a baby at this college. Right. Like you're a grown adult here. Right. Mom, you can come. But at some point, we got to let the kids be adults. Right. And so we have everything from food scholarships where we feed our students. I made it a priority we have 8 fully stocked food pantries for our students. We spend about $1 million over 4 years, $250,000 a year just literally feeding the students out of these food pantries. We have about $1 million tied up in food scholarships, so we have food on campus now, and so they're essentially, and I'm very proud. My family, my wife and I, we endowed a scholarship to feed someone, and we named it after my daughter, and so we let my daughter pick actually. My daughter's 10, by the way. We let my daughter pick um, whether it would go to food or academics. And the reason I'm telling you this story is because her tuition fees are food. My 10-year-old put it best. She said, well, it doesn't matter how smart you are if you're dead from being hungry. Right. And so a 10-year-old, right, understands sort of that food is such a big issue. And I mean, there's the research shows that if you're hungry, you're not going to learn.
Mhm.
Right. So between food, we also, we've sort of shifted away from enrollments to a more retention-based strategy. So I'll tell you, I started the hour with that story about enrollments, but we really don't talk about enrollments anymore at my institution. We talk really about retention and momentum to graduation, and how quickly can we get students from where they are to where they want to be. And so we have food scholarships, we have housing allowances. Right now, someone is trying to get an enterprise Uber contract through so that we can Uber people when,
Mhm.
you know, something happens, their car breaks down. Because that's a good example, right? The average American doesn't have $500. Well, my students are even poorer than the average American, and most of them don't have cars to break down. And so, how are we working with the city for transportation, right? So, food, transportation, childcare, is a big sort of part of it. So, you know, we do offer 4 bachelor's programs. Our 5th one's going to be teaching, and I'm being very intentional about that because we want to home grow our own teachers for our own neighborhoods, and more importantly, we want to provide childcare for
Mhm.
early child care. So I'm going to do two. I'm going to do a twofer. We're going to have the teaching sort of program that's going to sort of help the child care situation. And really just again, here, if you show up to my institution, I'm very proud that the only thing we can't take care of is your excuses. If you have if you have a good why and your reason, we'll make it happen for you, and we'll meet you more than halfway. But yeah, so we basically have all the things. We're very blessed here.
Mario, how do you promote that? Is it through doing and demonstrating that you do it? But I guess how does someone who's considering Lone Star or encouraging, say, their child to go to Lone Star, learn about the way you look after students?
Yeah, so if you were to call anyone at my institution, any of our 8,000 employees, and ask them what is the chancellor's favorite phrase,
Yeah.
they would all answer the same thing, and it's just do the thing,
Hmm.
right? And so do the thing. Don't write papers about it, don't present about it, don't give webinars about it, don't like write, you know, don't go to conferences about it. Do the thing. Right? There's so many people in higher education that just spend so much time doing all those things, but they're not actually doing the thing. And so this remarkable thing happens when you do the thing, people will tell other people that you did the thing.
Right.
Right? So like,
Yep.
hey, are these jokers really serious? They're going to give you a book voucher for all your books? Yeah, they gave me one. Right? Because we're not in these people's communities, we're not their peers, we're not their friends, so they don't trust us,
Hmm.
but they'll trust the early adopters. And so if you do the thing, right, if you feed someone, they will tell other hungry people that you fed them.
Hmm.
If you transport someone, they will tell other people with transportation issues that you transported them. And you know, that's the best marketing. And so that's how we do it. We actually just do the thing on a very sort of small prototype basis, and little by little it kind of our issue is our ideas kind of take off, and sometimes they grow faster than we can um, manage them, to be perfectly candid.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly best to be ambitious. Sounds fantastic. Alison, how in your career have you seen organizations best leverage, a perspective on safety and well-being, and it's having an impact on your recruitment and retention?
I think it just goes back to what Mario was just saying about do the thing.
Mhm.
It is, you know, you've just got to show that you're doing it, but it is about being upfront about things, actually. And yeah, you know, again, referring back to Megan, you know, that in years gone by, people wouldn't talk about it.
Mhm.
You wouldn't put on your website that you had something where someone could get 24-hour support, because why would they need it?
Mhm.
Surely that means there's a problem. Whereas now, I think, you know, students and their families, they want to know that if they need to reach out, there is somebody going to be there. And, you know, the amount of reporting facilities now that universities have and have to have, so that our students can tell us what is going on. Yeah, it's just so important. And, you know, I know that when people are looking at prospective universities, putting it fairly bluntly, they might be looking for a specific subject, but that subject's going to be taught in a few universities. It's going to be unusual for you to be the only place that does it. So then the decisions are being made on, where is it? What's the location like? What is the city like? Do I want to live in that city? Do I feel safe in that city? What does the campus look like? Do I feel safe on that campus? Or is it because some of our universities don't have a campus. They're, you know, spread out across parts of a city. So then how do they feel connected? How do they know that when they walk from that building in one part of the city to that building over there, they're actually going to be safe? So I think it is about being overt and upfront, and I'm putting it basically showing that you care. And if people think that you care, they are more likely to come to you. And when things start to go wrong, and things do go wrong, that's life. If you're there and you actually help them, they're more likely to stay. So I think it's desperately important.
Yeah. Thanks, Alison. As a parent of a senior in high school, off to college this calendar year, I can say that I've seen a variety of ways in which security and safety has been communicated about, and the best do communicate about it proactively. There's still some of those who don't, or maybe just don't elevate it. But I would encourage everyone on the call here and listening to hear from this best practice and really drive that. Bit of a different topic now, and that's around crisis preparedness and response. And we've already heard about some crisis responses. I really want to think about crisis preparedness. One of the things that we do at CriticalArc is we have a consultancy arm, and we engage with organizations, and we not only provide technology, but we ensure that they're ready to deal with situations. Part of that can be doing things like tabletop exercises or full-scale exercises. And when we think about it from, say, our perspective as kind of practitioners in safety and security, and especially those who we deal with most intimately, who are the public safety and emergency team members, we all think we want to be match fit. We want to run exercises. We want the organization to be aware of what to do in certain circumstances and have it a top of mind. But that can sometimes be a counter to really the mission and even just the day-to-day operations of an organization. You can't run full-scale exercises every month. That's going to be too disruptive. So I'm interested in how your organization thinks about being match fit, being ready for crises, and what you do, and maybe the types of discussions you have at the senior levels about are you prepared to take disruptions to the organization, or maybe increase concern in the population by running exercises in order to have resiliency. So interested in the conversations you have and what the end result of those are. So maybe Nisi, could you start and share some learnings there?
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to say that this is where CriticalArc came in and helped us tremendously in this area. So I've come to learn that a solid crisis plan is part choreography and also part compassion. And so with the help of CriticalArc and the consultant services that you mentioned, you all helped us build a robust framework with clearly defined roles, which is very important when it comes to crisis management. So we now have this overarching crisis management framework that encompasses a CARES team for our students and a threat assessment team that we didn't have, and a triage team, and all aligned under that overarching crisis management structure that you all helped us to put in place. Now, the key elements, obviously, of an effective response strategy is going to be that the clear communication channels that a number of my colleagues on the call mentioned, built-in feedback loops, and well-documented, regularly practiced protocols. I mean, that is so important that you do that, and we realize that yes, it's going to take time away from some day-to-day. But if you don't have the regularly practiced protocols, whatever your interval is, when a crisis comes, you're going to be running around like crazy. But if you have well documented and regularly practiced protocols, then you can kind of like kick into gear because you've done it so many times, that and that combination allows us to respond with both speed and intention, and obviously, and empathy. And a good example that I can share is, when we had a student recently experience a significant mental health crisis, and our cares team and collaborating with our campus safety, campus security, and student affairs teams were able to activate immediately. And that's because of those regularly practiced protocols. And they were clear, the roles were already rehearsed and defined. And without us having, without us doing that and going through that exercise and practice with CriticalArc, and I have to give a shout out to Jason Goodrich. He really helped us with that. It wasn't just about reacting. It was about, for those teams, it wasn't just about reacting. It was about responding with humanity but structure working hand in hand. That is why it's super important to, regardless of how much time it takes, you have to get the practice and the tabletop exercises in.
Thanks, Nisi. Mario, you're the type of leader who leads from the front with regards to this, especially because of your background, as you discussed, being in the loop on communications. So your organization has you as a primary asset, but you also have the challenge of you've got a very dispersed organization with each of your locations. So how do you think about keeping up the readiness level across such a dispersed organization, and exercising and educating and keeping
Yep. So we have all the drills, all the tabletop. We even have a simulated active shooter. That's actually very traumatic, even if it's simulated. We give people all sorts of warnings because we have officers come in SWAT gear. We coordinate with different. So we have like full range of from tabletop to literally using rubber bullets and shooting people and people pretending to be shot. So we do all of that. But I think that for the purposes of this, I think the quick tips that I have just from 10 years of suffering, and I can be a cautionary tale for other people because I'm here to teach you from my mistakes, not because I'm some savant. I think who talks about what is one of the most important things, and when. Who, what, and when. So I'll give you a situation. So we have active shooter situations. We've had active stabbing situations. And in those situations, the police chief is the public speaker. That's the only person in all of our bureaucracy. I don't speak. The presidents don't speak. The vice chancellor. In a live law enforcement situation, the chief is in charge. And the chief speaks. As soon as the person is arrested, neutralized, or the law enforcement part of it ends, then the public information officer takes over. Because you don't, back to I think the point you're trying to make, Glenn, and the point that Nisi was making, you don't want to wing these things, and you don't want to have a situation where you have multiple people speaking about the same topic, because then it becomes, in most things, for example, college president is sort of the college president, and the college president is in charge of everyone, and that's the case in most things. But when it comes to, for example, an active shooter situation, I need you to go ahead and sit down, President so-and-so. The law enforcement, you see what I'm saying? It's a life and death situation. We don't have time for our beautiful shared governance bureaucracy. Like, it's, you see what I'm saying? Like, you have to know when it is that certain people are in charge and when they're not, and who gets to speak. And so I think what we've done here is we have, from GR, government relations sort of crises, to law enforcement crises, to instructional crises, really sort of sit down and segment every conceivable crisis and say, who is the incident commander, for example? Who is the operational commander for this thing? And then who's the public spokesperson? And more importantly, who are their backups? And do the people know who their backups are? Because you take for granted that in a situation, you're going to be able to get a hold of somebody. Right? Like here, for example, Hurricane Beryl, we've learned we now have satellite phones. Right. And my staff has warned me that it's like $10,000 a minute. So don't ever use it for anything other than that. But that's a good example. We learned that you can't even call people. Right. And going back to the very beginning, what if that person's home just got wiped out? Right. Like executives are humans too, people. Right. And so really like who gets to talk about what and when, I think is where I would start. Like, do you have a good understanding of who's in charge? Because in such a like matricized organization like mine, it can
Mm.
be very confusing who's actually in command. And then don't get me started on the between the system people and
Right.
the local people,
Yeah.
right? Because there's usually officers for both
Yeah.
um, of the same subject matter. So that would be my advice to your audience is who, what, and when.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thanks, Mario. Alison, we heard some things there that may be a bit different to the, I guess, the UK and the rest of the world type scenario. Police teams on campus and chief of police and active shooters less of a concern, but there's other types of scenarios. And we know, for example, in the UK, there's specific concerns around terrorist incidents, for example. Um, so just giving that context for everyone here, what types of things as far as readiness and crisis preparation are common in your experience out there in the UK?
Yes, yes, indeed. Though sadly, we do have incidents where we have to have police on campus.
Mm.
And certainly concerns about there are terrorist concerns, but then there's also concerns about the lone radicalized person who may do some things. So we have all of that, unfortunately. But I think what I was thinking about whilst listening to people talk was, we have tabletop exercises, we have gold, silver, bronze command and all this sort of thing. So very good protocols. But it's those incidents that you don't expect. And they're the ones when you really get tested. So my favorite example was we had a power cut. Doesn't sound like much. Power goes off every now and again. But what you don't realize at first is it's not just you who's got the power cut, it's actually your corner of the city. And then you start to think there's something more going on. And because it was in the winter, the light goes really quickly in this country. So by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, in the buildings, really dark. It wasn't safe. And what had happened was, yes, there'd been an incident that it was an accident, but it cut off part of the city. And I think it was over 12 hours before we got the power back. We'd got students in accommodation who didn't know what was happening. We had to shut the campus, which is unheard of. It's not what happens. And because no one had expected that to be a crisis, dealing with it was really interesting. And we learnt a lot, as you do.
Yeah.
And then there's other incidents where you think you know what you're going to do, but actually when it actually hits, if you have a cyber incident, you think you know what you're going to do, but it is that working out what still works, what can we actually do, where, what are the lines that we've got. So to me, a lot of it is, and we do an awful lot of scenario planning.
Right.
It's those scenarios we don't expect.
Yeah. Yeah. Mario, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I told you that I was going to be a cautionary tale. And so Allison just triggered a memory of something that I had never even conceived of, right? I'm going to put this out there so that you learn from my mistakes. Have a plan for your chemistry lab chemicals if you lose power for extended periods of time. So we lost power for 2 weeks in some buildings, and we had no plan for what to do. And then I made the mistake of sending out a message telling that college that their building might blow up if we let them back into. And then they were like, well, what kind of chemicals are you storing there? So have a plan for extended. What are you going to do? How are you going to move them? How are you going? Who do you have to hire? Because most people wouldn't even come touch these chemicals,
Right.
right? Make sure the chemicals are labeled, right? Because then you have to pay even more money to figure out what the chemicals are. But I just wanted to throw that out there because I learned that during Hurricane Beryl, and it was something I had never even thought of what happens because most chemicals are stable for a day or two,
Right.
but 2 weeks is too long.
Mm.
I have spent more time worrying about what happens if we have to switch the fridges off than I can tell you.
Great learnings. Great learnings. Megan, I wanted to throw to you last here when we talk about preparedness, because I think out of the organizations here, you're probably the most match fit as far as
Yeah.
having dealt with some pretty for the size of your organization, some pretty challenging times, with Helene last year. How do you think about maintaining that level of preparedness? And if you've got an organization that's been through that and relatively traumatic,
Yeah.
how do you get them back into being serious about, we need to practice?
Well, and uh, as you all were talking about chemicals in buildings, I was thinking a lot about that, and we had buildings that were offline for 60 days, and what that meant
Mhm.
to move chemicals, what that meant to bring buildings back online that then didn't have air conditioning or HVAC, what that then meant for mold, air quality, and all the requirements to kind of bring those buildings and things back online. I think when I think about crisis preparedness and tabletopping for a
Mhm.
number of the things that we've talked about here. I'm gonna liken it to a basketball team or an athletic team, right? But I'll use a basketball team as an example. Like you have to do tabletops because like Nisi said and like Allison said and like Mario said, people need to know their roles.
Mhm.
The specifics of the crisis might change, whether it's a hurricane or whether it's a power outage or whether it's a train derailment near your campus that has now led to an air quality issue because of there being gases in the air. You don't necessarily know what you're going to be dealing with in a particular moment, but you need your team to be training and know what their roles could potentially be. And one of the things that I think is most helpful in training and tabletops and whether, having CriticalArc help with that, Safe Zone to CriticalArc help with that, or doing that on your campus is the more you can help your team on your campus get comfortable with that, the better they're going to be because you're going to be dealing with unknown X variables. You can't know what those are ahead of time. They're not going to work the way that you want them to work. The people, your primary communicators aren't going to show up because, like you said, their house washed away, or you couldn't get a hold of them, or they had some other reason they couldn't get to campus. Um, your first thought about how you were going to communicate isn't going to work. For us during Hurricane Helene, we had an issue where not only did our first and second form of communication wash out, right? We had a situation where we had our like most campuses, we had our first plan, we had our second plan, we had our third plan, which was to reach out to Safe Zone and have our contact, who was our person at Safe Zone, to send out our Bulldog alert for us, right? And our plan was to do that through our copper line out of our police station until it washed away, and we couldn't contact anyone, right? And so, like, you're fine until your third mode of communication washes away and you're on a mountain by yourself and can't get a hold of anybody, right? And so, tabletopping, and when you're tabletopping, you're like, this is crazy. Like, this is so silly. Our third plan isn't gonna wash away. Glenn, I think I shared this story with you and your team, right? But like, what you need to know is like when these crazy scenarios happen, you're not going to know what they are, but you need to have it like your team has to be athletic enough, flexible enough to know like who's going to be able to step up and run the play
Mm.
uh when whatever comes to be comes to be. And so the story that I shared with you all post Helene was that um it's never good when all of your things wash out. And what it meant for us was that I had to get in our chief of police's Tahoe and drive the 1.5 miles down the street to the police station, go up to the roof of the police station, connect to a Starlink. And it was me, and like this, y'all, you never want this. You never want your vice chancellor for student affairs having to be the person who logs on to your Bulldog alerts and be the person who's typing it out to your campus community. That means like so many things have failed in your planning, not because our planning failed, but because the situation was so complicated, because people couldn't show up, because people couldn't get here, because their houses had washed away, because they couldn't get to campus, because we couldn't get a hold of them. because the river rose, right? So many things. But having people cross-trained, having a system that was easy enough that I could be like, all right, I know how to use this. Let me get this emergency information out. And it meant that our team was cross-trained enough where between the chief and I, we could get to that police station, we could get to that roof of that police station, we could get that bulldog alert out, and we could move through a situation where luckily for us in our circumstance, we got through it and we didn't you know, have major casualties in our community for our campus, right?
Right.
Not in
Yeah.
Asheville, but for our campus. And so without being trained enough and being flexible enough
Mhm.
for people to be like, this isn't my job, but I'm trained enough to know what this job looks like, so I can step in and help in this way. I think is really important. Mario, you said this well, but I would just reinforce it. Knowing you can't over prepare in terms of crisis comms, right? I have never been in a situation where I'm like, we could have had done less preparation on the comm side. And so I just would reiterate your points there. I think they're spot on.
Yeah, and Megan, I think I'd reinforce there with things like tabletop exercises. Sometimes it can be a really, extreme scenario which people think might not be realistic, but you're living proof of, maybe that's the end of the spectrum. Those activities need to be situated at in order to test the flexibility and athleticism of the team. So Mario, you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight for Megan, well, one, good job. I've never met you before, but I'm inspired, and that's very inspiring to have someone that committed. But along those lines is Glenn, and to your audience, there's also a human element that I want to make sure not everyone will do what Megan did. Not everyone will jump into their car and figure it out. And so part of it, as the most senior leader of my institution, my job is to hire sort of that highest level subject matter expert for each different area, right? And there's some people that are beautiful, sort of insert SME here: academic affairs, student services, legal. But when it's prime time and I need you to be the person on that wall, there's some people that just, like one of my executive vice chancellors says, we're all built differently and we all bring different gifts to the world. And some people will do all the tabletop exercises, but then you get them up there and it's time to sort of make those calls and they're going to fold like a lawn chair, right? And so it's really important to even plan for that as the most senior leader, or if you're the most senior person in charge of it, is you have to have a backup, because none of us know how we're going to react and how others are going to react when the stress is real. And I'll just leave it at that.
That's a brilliant takeaway and summary, Mario. What I'll do now is we'll close things up with final comments from anyone, and anything that's been left unsaid. As has been mentioned multiple times here, we could probably go for hours. I mean, it's a fascinating topic. But Nisi, any final comments from you?
Yeah, I want to say this has been a really great panel. You all are very inspiring and very, very impressive. And I even jotted down some notes of your lessons learned, so that we can implement it on Western U's campus. So thank you for that. Thank you, Glenn, for putting this together. One last final thought for me regarding just safety and well-being is just, we do understand that it's a dance that we're all doing between safety and being welcoming and empathetic and having open campuses. And it is something that I think I can speak for all of us when I say that, it's top of mind for all of us and we take it very seriously. We want to ensure that you all feel safe, whether you're a student, you're an employee, you're a guest on our campus. We want to make sure that you feel safe. And we understand that we can't 100% guarantee that nothing bad is ever going to happen, but we can 100% guarantee that we are always thinking about it and always improving or trying to improve what we do and how we respond, and also being proactive. So thank you again for this very great panel. Looking forward to meeting you all in person, because I want to stay connected.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Nisi, and thank you for all you do. Alison, final comments from you?
Yeah, no, and it's thank you from me as well. It's been a real privilege to be, with such great people on the panel, and again to learn so much. And from my perspective, I think it is, to me, the university community is really important. And I focus a lot on the word community. It really matters. Everybody who's involved in the university, from all of the staff to all of the students, and actually to be able to know that there are people who care about their well-being, they care about their safety and security. And no, you can't guarantee that things won't go wrong. Of course they will. It's life. But knowing that there is somebody there that you can reach out to easily, I just think is desperately important. So yeah, to me, it all boils down to showing that you care.
Yeah, yeah, brilliant. Megan, over to you.
Yeah, I think my final thoughts on this are, that so much of what we think about in terms of emergency management is about preparation and protocols, and I think that's true.
Mhm.
And I think the kind of counterpoint to it is that it's about relationships and partnerships.
Mm.
That none of this work is possible. You can't have a person whose job this is, right? You have to be in relationship with partners on your campus, knowing who's each other's backups, who's going to pitch in, what's that going to look like, because no one person can do it. And so not ever getting so focused on just what are the protocols, or what's the policy, and losing the partnerships and the relationships that make all that work. So thank you for bringing us together.
Yeah, thanks, Megan. Mario, last comments from you before I
Yes,
wrap?
thank you. So just real quick, 2 points. One, I think that my advice, especially if, when I started Lone Star, I had a department of 6.
Mhm.
And now I oversee 8,000, right? And so I think that no matter where sort of you are in the hierarchy of our beautiful bureaucracy, it is incumbent upon you to make sure that you provide safety and security to the people that you lead. So you might not be able to do anything about the, wackadoodles around you, but you can do something about sort of your specific department. And two, I want to make sure that, one, I thank everyone on the panel because I've learned just as much. And then two, I want to thank CriticalArc and Glenn, thank you for having me. And I'll just say this, and I'm not pursuant to FTC rules, I'm not being paid to say this, and I have received no benefit for this. But I'll tell you that CriticalArc has been for us, and the Safe Zone app has been the best app that we've had the entire time that I've been here. It's night and day compared to some of the other apps that will remain nameless because I don't fear lawsuits, but I try to avoid them where possible. It has been sort of the best that we've had, so thank you for that. And I think that an investment in you and your company is well worthwhile. And I give my wholesale endorsement to anyone sort of on the fence. And I'll just end with this: do the thing, right? Like you watch the webinar, now what are you going to do? Right? You watched the webinar, but the webinar wasn't doing the thing, right? And so what are you doing now? So thanks, Glenn.
Thank you, Mario, and thanks everyone. I think in summary, for everyone who's attended here and anyone who may see the recording, I think we all should be inspired that there are leaders in your organization, no matter what level you're at, but there are leaders in your organization who are thinking about this. It is top of mind. It's something that should be top of mind for the organization. And I don't think there should be any reticence to engage. If you have a feeling that you're not being listened to as a public safety or an emergency stakeholder, or you've got concerns about this is a whole of organization thing, and there are receptive ears and there are people in the organization who will help champion this area and this cause. And I think as we started, it's directly linked to the mission of the organization. Recruitment, especially retention, people having the right experience, and it's right in line with the business of the organization. So it's crucial. So I think if you are seeing barriers or feeling any restriction in your organization, show people this webinar. Look for opportunities to engage and network with people who've been there and done it, and influence your organization to be as good as you possibly can be in this realm. Thank you very much for all the attendees, our esteemed panel. Fantastic to spend the hour and a quarter with you. And as Nisi said, looking forward to catching up in real life. I appreciate everyone's time. Thank you for everything.